Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you today. Glad you are with us as we come together for our Friday edition of Ask the Theologian. And we should have some fun here. Let's see what we got in the works up for today. We've got a Daniel 2 question. We've got a Hebrews 4:15 question. We've got a Genesis 1:3 question. We've got a Judgment Seat of Christ question. Another one. We've got a right dividing question about several passages that are often used to describe or to say that there really are no dispensations, everything's always been the same. Let's check that. A rusting of gold question. And water baptism question. Excellent. I like these questions. We're going to go with it here. Let's do it. We got some good ones. And whether you are from Holly Springs, Mississippi, or Cambodia, or London, or Trinidad, Colorado, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, or St. Croix County, Wisconsin, I see y'all on there. We got Texas, we got Arkansas. Good to see everybody today. We got Tennessee here with us, so welcome everybody. Wherever you are, we're going to have a good time today and enjoy our little journey together. It'll be good. Okay, let's do it. Let's do a television program. How about that? And let's start out with the question on proof about so-called proof that the Old Testament and the New Testament have always had the same salvation. Let's start with that question. You know the drill if you've been with us before. We do a little 28.5 minutes of a television program, pre-recorded, and so we'll pre-record it right now. We'll do the live portion of it right now. We still take your questions and your comments and chat away. If you're watching via Biblify, then your screen will align with my screen, and so it should show up about Romans chapter 1, verse 12 right now, if it's all working. Our staff of one working on all the bugs on that, but it's coming along well. 28.5 minutes from now, we'll stop. We'll sort of stop. We'll stop the television program. You stay tuned, okay? I'll be back in about 15 seconds, and we'll get our questions started. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Randy White, and this is Ask the Theologian. Turn in your questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at askthetheologian.com, and we will give every single one of them a biblical, right-divided answer. You'll follow right along. We'll alert you when that is taking place, and we want to start today with a question that comes. It's a ministry question. It's a debate question. It's a dealing with an issue question, and it says, a standard evangelical gave some proof, quote, that salvation was always the same in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Let's stop right there because, of course, that is the standard evangelical answer. Ask anybody, and they'll all know that salvation has always been the same. It is by grace through faith, not of works. And you say, well, are you a dispensationalist? Well, of course I'm a dispensationalist. Well, how come you don't have a dispensationalism in salvation? Well, that's always been one single dispensation. Okay, well, you're a covenant theologian then. That's what covenant theology believes. But here's the way they come and they give the proof. So, for example, they go to Romans 4, 1 through 5. They go through Galatians 3, 5 through 7. the 11th chapter of Hebrews, the faith chapter. And so this minister of the gospel says, can you help me make sense of Romans 4, Galatians 3, Hebrews 11, showing that the dispensation of grace is in fact different than the Old Testament and the Gospels? I desperately need your help. I would be happy to do so. You know, people get, I don't know, maybe I'm overusing the term here, but people get almost downright violent on this issue. If you come and you say, hey, really, there is this thing that is new, that is ours. Well, if you just go there, they're okay. But if you say, this thing that is new is our salvation. Now, first of all, let me say, and we're going to look at the Romans, Galatians, and Hebrew passages in just a moment. But let me say that we do not always have to be on the defensive. Especially those of us who are ministers of the gospel, we feel like everyone's just supposed to come and we are supposed to give an answer to defend our position, but we're not supposed to be so bold as to cause them to defend their position. So at some point, flip the argument around. Okay, you believe that salvation has always been the same, right? Yes, absolutely, certainly. Okay, what do you do with Ephesians chapter 3, especially, let's say, verse 2, if you have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God, which is given me to youward. Do you believe that Paul received the dispensation of the grace of God? Well, yes, it says so right there. Okay, what was the dispensation of the grace of God? It was the same thing it's always been. Always, 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 always been. So he didn't receive the dispensation of the grace of God. Did he or didn't he receive the dispensation of the grace of God? This is what I want to know. You come so bold towards me, I come so bold towards you. You must defend your position, because Ephesians chapter 3, verse 2 is so utterly clear. As a matter of fact, in verse 3, it says that it is by revelation He made known unto me the mystery. He says this mystery in verse 5, in other ages was not made known unto the sons of men as it is now revealed. So what's he talking about here? What's going on? Well, that was the filling of the Holy Spirit. Well, the filling of the Holy Spirit was promised in Joel chapter 2. How in the world was that a mystery? Everybody knew about it. That's no mystery. What is the dispensation of the grace of God? What is unique about the dispensation of the grace of God? What is it? Or you could take 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. He comes forth and he says, okay, that Paul is, as it says here, a pattern to them which should hereafter believe on him unto eternal life. And so we ask the question then of them, how is Paul a pattern? How is Paul the prototype, the Greek words that are used in there? And in what way is Paul the prototype for those who would believe in Christ hereafter? I'm one of those. How did it change? Well, it was exactly the same way. How did it change? Well, it was by grace through faith, and they just knew a little bit more about it. That's how it changed. They knew a little bit more about it. You see, I think that they've got, if they're pressed to it, they've got a bankrupt argument. It will not stand to scrutiny. Now, let me tell you, especially if you're a minister and you're out here doing this, if you're a minister of the gospel, you'll lose them. They cannot stand the scrutiny of their positions. They just want to insist that you jump to it and obey their commands of their theology. I think as a pastor, as a teacher, that not only should they hold our feet to the fire, but we should hold their feet to the fire. I think when you take this position that salvation has always been the same, that is one that does not survive scrutiny. Even a basic reading of Scripture sees that a relationship with God was not always the same. You can take Paul in the 2nd chapter of Ephesians, who talks about how the Gentiles were without God, they were without hope. Well, how is that? I mean, if it was always by grace through faith, not of works, how is it that they had no hope? Something has changed. I think, again, they have a bankrupt argument. And when someone has a bankrupt argument, sometimes you have to, let me say that differently. When someone has a bankrupt argument, but they won't give it up, the best you can do is push and push and push and push and push until maybe they will come to a crisis of belief. Now, probably what will happen is they will turn and walk away. And then they will go into some other standard evangelicalism, and they'll get the infant pablum that they've been fed upon all their lives, and they'll go away as a fat little Christian, just happy, happy, happy. And you'll say, okay, you know, they're happy, happy, happy as a fat little Christian over there, sucking on the on the nipple, you know, of the infant formula that is given there by the evangelical church. But I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not there. And you'll provide a ministry that is of value to some others. But they do come to you with some of these passages, like Romans 4, Galatians 3, Hebrews 11. And I think when people come to us, we do also have that responsibility to say, okay, what do we do with this? Do these hold up to scrutiny for our position? We want a position that is rock solid because we are scientists. And a true scientist, follows the evidence, regardless of whether it goes with, what they wanted it to say or not. They're going to follow the evidence and look at it. And so, as a good scientist, we look, say, at Romans chapter 4, and Paul comes in and he says, what shall we say that Abraham our father was as pertaining to the flesh hath found? For if Abraham were justified by works, he whereof to glory, but not before God. For what saith the Scripture? Abraham believed God, and it was credited unto him as righteousness. This little quote from Genesis chapter, I believe it's chapter 15, verse 6. And then in verse 4, now to him that worketh is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. Now, they come and say, see, I told you so. Salvation is always by grace through faith, not of works. Well, you and I stop and we consider it, and we say, what is Paul doing in Romans chapter 4? What Paul is doing is proving that God can work by grace through faith, not of works. Well, why would he have to prove that? Everybody knows that. But not his Jewish audience of Rome that he was speaking to, who insisted it's got to be by works. It's got to be, if God's going to do something, it's got to be by the works of the covenants that he has given to us. And Paul says, wait a minute, that's not always been the case. Didn't God give Abraham a grace-based promise, not of works? Well, absolutely, he did give Abraham a grace-based promise, not of works. What was that promise? That Abraham would die and go to heaven? That Abraham would be saved right then and there? That Abraham would be saved according to the Pauline pattern? That Abraham had the dispensation of grace? Was that the promise? No. The promise was, I'm going to give you a land, and I am going to give you a nation which will be a blessing to all the earth. That was the promise that was given, shall we say, by grace through faith. That is not the promise that is given to us. The entire purpose of Romans chapter 4, verses 1 through 5 and onward, the entire purpose is Paul saying we have a new dispensation. The people are saying, no, God can't do that. It's been by law. And it had been, by the way, by law. And they had a legitimate concern. And Paul says, yeah, but wait, look, before the law, we had Abraham. Now, was the Abrahamic promise that anybody who believes in Jesus Christ, in the completed work of Jesus Christ, died, buried, and rose again, that they would be saved? Was that the Abrahamic promise? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a sermon series on the life and times of Abraham. You can read the life and times of Abraham, and you will not find information about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. You might find a hint of it in maybe the sacrifice of Isaac, but does Abraham know about the coming sacrifice of the Messiah? No, he doesn't know about it. He's not believing in it. He's not trusting in it. And if you think he is, you are doing eisegesis, and we don't allow eisegesis in our conversation. So, Paul in Romans 4 is explaining that God has given a promise, which is not the salvation promise. He has given a promise that is by grace through faith to Abraham. Abraham believed, and it was credited unto him as righteousness. Now, don't come to me and say God can't do it, because I'm showing you God can do it. That's Romans chapter 4. Now, if we, for example, go to Galatians chapter 3, verses 5 through 7, it says, he therefore that ministereth to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you, doeth he it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Even as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted unto him as righteousness. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith are the same as the children of Abraham. Here Paul comes in these particular 3 verses that are given there. And he speaks, he that ministereth to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you. You know, it would be interesting to stop and say, who is that? Who is this? He that ministereth to you the Spirit and worketh miracles among you. I actually think Paul's speaking of himself. He says, hey, you know, I come and I work miracles among you. I minister the Spirit among you. I'm working miracles among you. Am I doing it by the works of the law or by faith? I'm doing it by the hearing of faith, not by the works of the law. And the idea of Galatians is really the same as the Romans. The Galatians, or the Judaizers within the book of Galatians, were saying, God can't do by grace through faith. This is no. He can't do that. It's got to be by the works of the law. That's what the Judaizers were saying. That is the context, is people insisting that Pauline salvation has got to be by law. And Paul comes and says, look, the things I'm doing to you right now and doing among you, they're not by law, they are by the hearing of faith, even as, same as Romans, here is my illustration. I want to show you that God can do a grace work if he wants to do a grace work. Abraham believed, and it was credited unto him as righteousness. Now, can you take even as and say, this is exactly the same? No. You know, chemically, you could say, well, this is like that. In lots of physical attributes, you can say this is like that. But as we say often around here, things that are similar are not the same. And so you've got an illustration. An illustration is not the same thing. And so here is the same case of Galatians 3 as you have in Romans chapter 4. Now, if we were to go from there, for example, to Hebrews chapter 11, it has this great, sometimes we call it the faith chapter, and it speaks of faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, for by it the elders obtained a good report. You know, the elders, the patriarchs, the forefathers that are given there, obtained a good report. How? By faith. Well, Indeed, they did. Is faith absent from the pages of the Old Testament? No, absolutely not. And our argument that God is offering today something that he has never offered before, and that is a gift of salvation, and that he began to do that just like Paul said was a faithful saying, worthy of all acceptation in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15 and 16. Our argument is not saying there's never been such a thing as grace before. There's never been such a thing as faith before. Indeed, there has always been grace. There has always been faith. God was gracious when he gave the law, and the law required faith. But was living in the law, which required faith and was a great gift of God's grace, was living under the law the same as what we have today? No. They had two similar characteristics. Things that are similar are not the same. So was faith required of the elders? Yes, certainly, and by it they obtained a good report. Through faith we understand the worlds that were framed of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. You know, how do we understand the revelation of Genesis chapter 1 about creation? Well, we do it through faith. We can't go back and recreate the model in a lab where we recreate the universe. So at some point we have to take the evidence of the model, and we have to come and we have to take it by faith. And you can take Genesis 1 by faith, or you can take Charles Darwin by faith. Which one is it going to be? So our argument again that our gift of salvation is new by grace through faith, not of works, does not mean faith does not exist. So this is a straw man argument, as if they come along and saying, well, preacher, you think that this thing of grace and faith is brand new. I'll show you all through the scripture grace and faith. Well, it's a straw man. Of course I don't think it's brand new. There's always been grace. There's always been faith. There have even been promises that God gave based upon belief, faith alone, like the promise to Abraham. So those have always been there. But what do you do with Ephesians chapter 3? What do you do with 1 Timothy chapter 1 verses? Do you just read them quickly and move on and say, you know, Paul, he was speaking hyperbole? That's a way of saying he was just lying. He lied when it said it's a worthy statement, it's a faithful statement worthy of all acceptation. No. Of course, everything he says is worth taking. Yeah. They won't deal with these passages. You and I can deal with Romans 4. We can deal with Galatians 3. We can deal with Hebrews 11. We deal with them in their context. We deal with them in the most literal way. These attackers who come and say salvation has always been the same will not deal with those passages. If there are some of you out there listening, perhaps on our television audience, and you say, no, salvation has always been the same, here's your homework assignment. Read Ephesians chapter 3. You can take the whole thing if you want. Read Ephesians chapter 3 and tell me what this mystery revelation was that had not been revealed. Read 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. And I think it helps if you'll read it in the King James, which gives the most literal translation there is. But take it and tell me, why does Paul call himself the pattern for all who would hereafter come? In what way is Paul the first? He does call himself the first. Is he just, some kind of arrogant fool that thinks that, he's the first guy that came along that God ever did any work? Is he so full of himself that he thinks that, that which, is clear in Abraham and down all through the holy generations, Paul comes along and says, well, it's me. I say it's me first. Is Paul such an arrogant guy like this? What's up with this? Deal with those passages, those of you who accuse. So there we come. I know I've spent a lot of time on this particular question. I would say, again, let's talk just general ministry. Let's talk the layman and let's talk the preacher. The layman needs to be able to come to the preacher and say, preacher, you got this one wrong. That has to be part of a church experience. I would not attend a church in which I could, if I was a layman in the church, in which I couldn't come and say, hey, preacher, wait a minute, you got this wrong. Well, I am one of the cloth. I am a man of God. I have received this. I would say, goodbye. See you later. I won't let the door hit me on the way out. The layman's got to be able to come to the preacher. And the preacher's got to be able to have an answer. I can tell you that my theology was shaped, not so much, it was shaped in the early years by parrots who regurgitated the theology that, was always found in all the textbooks. That's where my early theology was. But later, my theology was shaped by laymen who were coming to me and saying, Pastor, you say we're free from the law, and yet we're supposed to give 10% of our income under the law. I began to look at that and say, oh, well, this is kind of inconsistent, isn't it? You say we're free from the law, but over here it says, let a man give as he purposes in his heart. Which one are you going to go with? They held my feet to the fire, and that shaped my theology. And so we honor, and I've gotten away from the original question, speaking just pastorally a little bit. We who are pastors honor and must honor our theology being questioned and scrutinized strongly. And so sometimes they even come and they will put their bony finger into our chest and say, you better answer to this. And we better. Sometimes we have to say, okay, I'm going to go back and study it. I still think I'm right. I'm going to go back and study it. I'm going to see what I can come up with. Or maybe we have a ready answer right there. It's even better. But hey, we're human, and we don't know all the 66 books of the Bible and the ins and outs of all that. Lickety-split like that sometimes. So we study it, or we know the answer right then, whatever it is. We're willing to work it. But to the layman, let me say, it is a two-way street. And so the layman also has to be held responsible for his or her theology. And the layman who comes and seeks to accuse our theology to be wrong, they have to be willing to take it. Now, let me speak for a moment to the layman who's not willing to take it. They can dish it out, but they can't bring it in. Let me just say that you're selfish and indulgent, that you are closed-minded, that you don't have an argument. If somebody cannot argue their argument, I'll just say they do not have an argument. If all they can do is get louder and get madder, then I am going to assume it's a worthless argument that I don't need in my life. I want something that will logically hold up. Now, as a layman, I realize you're a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, and you got a job out there, and you're carrying out your job through the thick and thin, and that you may not have an immediate answer to some of these things, but that's okay. I'm good with 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. As if you're working on it and say, okay, I'm going to come back with an answer on Ephesians 3 and 1 Timothy chapter 1. I'm going to deal with this, Colossians chapter 1, with all of the passages that talk about my gospel, in which Paul, here's the list of homework assignments. I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen to, Randy White's sermon on Old Testament salvation and questioning the assumptions on that. And I'm going to deal with it, line by line. And I'm going to defend my position that position is wrong. Give me some time. I'll do that. In the meantime, when it's potluck lunchtime, we'll sit and we'll visit and we'll have a good time together. Now, that kind of relationship I can take. But if the relationship is not there on either end, either the pastor refuses to have his sacred theology questioned in any way, I honestly, if that's the case in your church, I'd leave today. Let me just be blunt. Why in the world would you want a pastor who cannot be questioned? I would leave right now. I wouldn't really much consider it. I'd call the pastor. I'd say, hey, pastor, you don't seem to have any place for dialogue within your ministry. You've got your theology and all you do is deliver it. It appears to me, deliver it from the ivory tower. I'm not interested in that. I'm going to move on. Thanks for all your work and all your service. I appreciate that. I know you mean well, but this just doesn't work for me. And I would leave. But the same as the pastor, if I had a layman coming to me constantly, expecting me to just lickety-split accept his theology, which I know to be wrong, and he won't sit down and take some counsel and work through some things, I don't care if he leaves either. You know, I've had I've had lots of people leave my church before. Used to bother me. And now I say, boy, things are going to be kind of nice now that they're gone. It'll be okay. And indeed, it does turn out to be okay. Okay, I spent the entire television here program on this one issue, but it really is a desperately needed issue down through our society and in our church, and has implications for lots of other issues of theology as well. I hold this mug on my desk that says, "Question the assumptions." I do that because I've been burned too many times. I've been burned by the government. I've been burned by the medical world. I've been burned by economists. I've been burned by theologians that come and deliver this stuff that's always been said, and I find out, man, that was wrong from the get-go. That had these assumptions that absolutely simply did not stand up to scrutiny. I'm not going to just accept them anymore. I just because I saw it on the internet, I'm not going to believe it. But just the same, just because I heard a doctor say it, I'm not going to believe it. I heard someone, with a PhD in economics. Oh, well, no, I'm not going to believe him. But the president said, well, I'm not going to believe it. I heard it on CNN. Or Fox News. Who cares? I'm not going to believe it. I'm going to investigate it. That's the kind of environment we need in the church that says, I really am going to come to the Word of God, and I'm going to take the Word of God as my sole source of authority for faith and practice. And I'm not just going to talk those words. I'm going to do those words. I'm going to bring them out and carry out that in a healthy way. And I'm going to learn along the way. Now that makes for a fun journey. It'll also mean you'll be in a tiny church, but you're welcome. I'm Dr. Randy White. This is Ask the Theologian, our full teaching ministry at randywhiteministries.org. Well, how about that, ladies and gentlemen? We spent the entire 28 and a half minutes on one program, but I think it was worth it there. Hey, Nicole in Michigan, good to see you there. Glad you're here. She doesn't get with us live very often. Glad you're here. Let's see what we've got here. We've got Deb in the Ozarks who's got a question on Daniel chapter 2. Verses 41 through 43. She says it speaks of the feet and the toes being made up of a mixture of iron and clay, one being of strength, the other being of weakness. I'm assuming that the metals are representative of the various nationalities, the cultures, the people of the empires. If so, is the government, the rulers, and their forced agenda of iron, strength, on those, is it at odds with those who will not comply, the clay, the weakness? Let's see what we've got here. Daniel chapter 2, beginning here in verse 41, as he says here, whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of the potter's clay, and part of iron. The kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom, this is the fourth of the world kingdoms, Gentile kingdoms, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Now, I would take this as as the key or the legend, if you will, that the iron is strength and the clay is brokenness or weakness, if you will. Now, with that, let's go on. Verse 43, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Now, this is an interesting little phrase right here. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. That could be taken in one sense just to say the strength and the weakness of this kingdom are kind of going to intersperse in all the activities of mankind, and that government is going to be strong, strong as goat's breath. And it's going to be weak. Weak like a little daisy. And it's going to be kind of mixed in together there, the strength and the weakness. But that doesn't really go with the words. The words here mix themselves with the seed of men. This is the wording of genetics. And could it be actually even, should we take it to be genetics? That somehow there is a transhumanism, we've talked about before, mingling themselves with the seed of men, but transhumanism doesn't really work. Shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And that is verse 43, and then it goes on to talk about the final kingdom that shall come. So these particular verses here, what have we got? Is this the rulers against the non-compliant? What is it? I think that, I'll put it this way. Whatever position you have on it, we can't prove you wrong, therefore you're right. This is one of those in which there are a number of scenarios we could give to Daniel 2:41 through 43 as the one that you have proposed that could fit the wording of what we've got. But from everything we can understand with any kind of a good literal understanding of the text, this is something that has not yet happened yet. Not yet happened. And so I have no doubt that when it does actually happen, we will look at it and say Daniel 2:41 through 43 described it perfectly. I may have got my scenario wrong, but they described it perfectly. It could be your scenario. It could be one of the transhumanism scenarios. It could be a number of different scenarios. It could even be, I think you could even take our government, for example, and say, well, it's got a lot of iron in it, man. Is it strong? I mean, it can go to the pillow guy and get his phone. It can go to the former president and, get his wife's stuff out of her drawer. It is a strong government. It can have 80,000 new IRS agents that go out with guns, get what they want. Whoa, it is strong. But you could also say it could fall apart any minute, literally. I mean, it could it's a house of cards. It is dried up clay that may fall apart just like our church wall here did. I mean, boy, it could come down any minute. And you'd be right. So could it just be kind of in the figurative sense like that? I think the issue here with Daniel 2:41 through 43 is it is a future passage and doesn't give us quite enough detail, and there aren't enough other passages that give enough insight in it to ever say, in my opinion anyway, unless I'm convinced otherwise sometime, in my opinion, to ever say exactly this is what is going to happen and this is how it's described. So I think it's one of those, maybe should you say that farther along we'll know all about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Thanks, Deb. Let's go to Edith in the Ozarks of Missouri, who has a question about Hebrews 4, 15, and 16. She says, I know the book of Hebrews is not to us. And you're right. It's to the Hebrews. But is Hebrew 4, 15, and 16 applicable to us? Even before we get to that passage, let me say that that which is not written to us, and that's much of the Bible, might have some things that are universally true. And so within that which is not to us, we might find something that we could use. And certainly even just the general understanding and the learning and the overall biblical worldview is something we could use. But would you take Hebrews 4, 15, and 16, and in our rightly divided color-coded edition, would you put this maybe in green to say it's not for us, but yeah, take it and run with it. Go to the bank with this one because it's universal. It is also true for us. Let's see, Hebrews 4, 15, and 16. We have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Well, let's take this first verse, verse 15, first of all, and how would we really argue against that? Maybe you could argue the priestly word and say, well, Christ is the head of the church. Do we want to use the word priest there? Maybe you could have a little bit of argument there, but it's almost semantics. Speaking of Jesus and his role right now, and it's certainly speaking of the messianic role prior to the time that the kingdom is established, and we happen to live under a time in which the Messiah sits at the right hand of the Father. Well, what's his role? Is it as a high priest? Well, certainly for the Jewish people it is. Does that apply to us? Well, if not directly, certainly indirectly. Cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities. Is he one that can understand? Well, he lived 33 years on this life. Yeah, he can understand what human life is like and our infirmities. And in all points tempted, like as we are. So, he knows, remember the old song, nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. This goes right here with, okay, yeah, he was touched with our feelings of our infirmities. He in all points was tempted as we are, yet without sin. Therein he goes to a different level than we are. Certainly, I think we could take verse 15. What about the promise of verse 16? Let us therefore. Now, therefore, it's built upon what he just said here. So let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace. Again, I think that this passage is speaking about, I'll use a theological term, the session. The session is this time in which Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. That's the same period we're in. Let us come before the throne of grace. Has he moved beyond into the millennial period? And could you argue Hebrews 4, 15, and 16 that that's actually looking forward to the time when the Jewish people will literally go before the throne? Because he's not on the throne right now. He's at the right hand of the throne. But he will be on the throne. Is this advancing to the future? And he says, hey, Jews, we have a high priest who is also a king. Because it uses some interesting words here, priest and king. A priest doesn't normally have a throne. So he's got the priest and the king. So in this sense, it's not like today, because even as we argued about the word earlier, he's not really a priest, right? A literal priest. There's some figurative aspect in which he is. but he's not like the priest in the temple and the temple service and all the liturgy that's going on, the liturgia, the Greek word, the service of the religious service. He's not doing that kind of priestly work. And king, well, is not sitting on the throne doing that kind of kingly work. So can we argue this to be future? And in the future, the Jewish people will have a priest who understands their infirmities and a king, and they can come boldly to his throne, which will be a throne of grace, and they then will obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I would want to check that out. I would want to pursue that further. I think that there is a decent possibility that we could argue Hebrews 4:15 and 16 to be completely future. Now, I know we always take that to be for today. And if and when I have a need, I can tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to go before God in prayer, and I'm going to beg for mercy and grace in time of need. So I'm not ready to say, no, this is not for us. I am ready to say we probably ought to investigate that a little more deeply and see if we can actually prove Hebrews 4:15 through 16 is about this era and not the one to come. That would take a little more study of the context of Hebrews chapter 4 and getting into chapter 5. If it is talking about this session, the session right now, the time in which Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, then we've got a pretty good case to take it. If it's not, if it's talking about the time he is literally the high priest and he is literally the king, then I think we would have a hard time saying that's for us, applicable to us right now, even for the Jewish people right now. So I hate to sort of unanswer that question, but I would be suspicious about just claiming it right off the bat there. Hope that is helpful to you. Let's move to Hereford, Arizona. Our friend Neil's got a question about Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, which more and more for me is becoming one of the most intriguing verses of all the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, just this little simple verse right here. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay, here's the question. Genesis 1:3, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God divided the light from darkness. That's verse 4, the division part. This is the first day. Then on day 4, verse 16, God created the sun, moon, and the stars. Is the light in verse 3 God's glory shining? I don't think so. Let's try to take it that way for a moment. God said, "Let there be light." I think if we were to look into that little phrase right there, "let there be," I think that we would find that that is I'm working with our coder, by the way, to get that note thing to keep from popping up, because I like to highlight a little thing. Hey, coder. But anyway, I think we would find that is a creative word. Something was created out of nothing. In fact, I don't know. Let's just bring up the Strongs here. Let there be. And if we bring it up here, let's just go ahead and show them all. And he's also working on enlarging that, but I'll just use the Control+ sign to get it. So it came to pass, Moses kept. Okay, that may not be this creative word. I'll tell you what, let's close that out. And let me let's push the little interlinear button here also, and let there be. Now this is the one that you got to have those $2 glasses. I'll have to talk to the coder about that. But it's ha-ya. You can think of it as hee-haw. Okay, yeah, to exist, to become, to come into being, to happen, to occur. Yeah, okay, so it's translated as to be or to become, to accomplish, to commit, to break, to cause. Okay, a number of different ways that it is put in there. So let's just say, let's dig into that word a little bit. But I think there would be enough evidence to say the light did not exist and now it does exist. That the light was created. That being the case, then it's a little difficult to say this is God's glory shining. You would have to say, let the light shine instead of let there be light. And it doesn't say, let the light shine. It says, let there be light. Could you secondarily argue that? I suspect you could. I just don't think it would be the strongest argument. So I think that right at the beginning, the way I would take it is that God created something that didn't exist, and that was light. Now, what does this mean that he created light? Light, still to this day, is a very difficult thing scientifically for us to figure out. I know that we know of various wavelengths and rays of light and the way that that causes color and all that kind of stuff. And we know of ultraviolet rays. We know of gamma rays. We know several of these things that we know and understand about. So we know a lot about light, but there's so much we don't know about light, like photons. I think photons are inherent with light. Would you agree with that, Nathan? What's that? Probably. He gave a very hesitating probably. So I'll say yes, absolutely. You can't have light without photons. So, could we take it, in the beginning God said, let there be photons. Photons are one of those things we don't totally understand. They do something and they cause an electric reaction, basically. Did God create the foundation for our electric world when he created light? That light has to be created first in order to make the even as we go on, let's see, you got the firmament, the waters. Okay, so let the waters. Well, water we know is H2O. And reminds me of a little chemistry joke. Would you like to hear it? Two guys go into a bar. One says, I'll have H2O. The other says, I'll have H2O too. He died. It's only funny to chemists. H2O2, you shouldn't drink it. H2O. It's one hydrogen, two oxygens. I suspect, I don't know, maybe this is wrong. Nah, yeah, it probably is wrong. I don't think you can have hydrogen nor oxygen without light. But certainly, you can't have two oxygens coming together and linking with a hydrogen to have water without light, because it involves electrons, because electrons are what glues together the two oxygens to the one hydrogen. And I think the electrons are inherently connected to light. Whatever it was God created when he created light, he enabled every other element to be created and to do its work. That without light, you couldn't do it. So it's almost like, I don't know. Let's pretend like God is a scientist and say, God is coming into the lab to make something, and he comes into the lab, and the very first thing he's going to have to do is turn the light on. Now, it's just so he can see and do his work and all that kind of stuff. But in a creative way, you got to have that light. So I think it's more than God's glory shining. And then I think that light, the photons, whatever all this stuff we don't know about light, that was required not only for the waters that are going to be separated, and then on the third day down here in verse 11, the grass, the grass, herb, yielding seeds, fruit trees, all that. This is before the sun, and again, that is definitely dependent upon photons and the photons getting the electrons going and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got in the 14th day, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, and you've got the sun and the moon and the stars. I'll have to look at the Hebrew on this. Let there be lights in the firmament. Is this some way placing the light that existed into the firmament? Let's collect this light together here and put it in the sun and the moon and the stars and whatnot. I don't know, and to some degree I doubt I'll ever know, because to some degree I'm not sure we can, but there's so much we don't know that we can know if we would put the word together. So is it God's glory shining? I'm going to go for, I think it's more than that. I think it's more scientific than that. Excellent question. Thanks, Neil, for that. Let's, while we're on science, let's go up to Eric in Oslo, Minnesota. And let's just see, it has been a while since I looked at a map, and I get curious, and I don't remember. I want to see where Oslo, Minnesota is, and so let's go right here. I was thinking it was way up north. Marshall County, Minnesota. Population 239, and you and I know one of them. Isn't this fabulous? Way up in Oslo, Minnesota, on Minnesota Highway 1. Sounds nice. Two main routes, 3 miles east of Interstate 29 in nearby North Dakota. Oh, so you're almost a North Dakotan. Nice. William soon became king of the Oslo. The city was named after Oslo, the capital of Norway. Soon after naming the city, okay, we've got a little history there. We've got 0.38 square miles. Big town. And the Red River of the North flows through at the western edge. Yeah, just all sorts of stuff. We won't read it all, but there, my friends, is Oslo, Minnesota. I tell you what, let's just check one other thing. Let's get some pictures of Oslo. Here, we'll try this one. Oh, there it is, Red River of the North, flooding. So visit again another day. I bet Eric's been on that bridge. Okay, sorry, got away a little bit, but I was just curious. Eric in Oslo, one of 239 people, or 229, whatever it was. Here it is. It has been suggested that the rusting of gold. This was last night. Is that session? Did we have session 11 last night? Session 12 last night of the book of James. It has been suggested that the rusting of gold is related to the mark of the beast. It may be that the chip, which contains a small amount of gold, will undergo some kind of biological breakdown reaction inside the body. Hence the terrible sores that go along with taking of the mark. What do you think about this idea? Honestly, I think I think it's a fantastic idea. I think what you have put together there, again, if we come to James, what is it, chapter 5, verse 3, your gold and silver is cankered. Cathode is the word there. And the rust, ion is the word there. Of them shall be a witness to you and shall eat your flesh. These are rich men speaking about the last days. If you're rich in the last days, it's because you got the mark of the beast. And so could the mark of the beast actually turn into these terrible sores? We know that gold oxide is indeed a skin corrosive. And could it be that these terrible sores, along with taking the mark, come with taking the mark? I think it's possible. You know, governments are forever telling us how safe something is, and it turns out to be utterly unsafe. So the government will come, yeah, very, very safe. We'll put this right here in there. So could you make, it's almost like the Daniel. Yeah, you can make the connection. Could you ever prove it? No. But could you set up here a really strong, solid argument that this could happen? You can. Now, I think that the chemist, again, would probably come to say, is there anything within the physical body that would oxidate gold? You know that gold is very stable. And being very stable, it doesn't like to rust, tarnish. It doesn't want to do that. So is there anything that in which that could happen within the body? Now, I know that, let me see if I can pull this up here in our RWM Connect. Where? Yeah, I see. Here we go. Chris had a little. He was doing a little reading. Here it is. Aqua Regia. This is a water. There's scientifically how it works. That will dissolve gold, dissolve platinum. So could this Aqua Regia, the king of waters, royal water, as it's called, which is nitric acid and hydrochloric acid together in a certain quantity, could that somehow get into the human body and cause this oxidation? There are some other things that oxidize gold too. It's not impossible for it to happen. But how does that get into the body, and how does that then do its work? When you mess with the RNA, which is kind of the computer coder of the DNA, it could do some things that maybe could cause this, because I have no doubt that all of the atoms are within us. They're just not moleculed together. You see, gets above my pay grade there on some of the language, but they haven't come together in that particular molecule. But the resources are there within our body. So you mess with the RNA. Well, who would ever do that? You could create a scenario in which you could do it. I think it would be very interesting, again, to get together some chemists, either on the lay level or on the professional level. I would suspect that you could find some lay chemists that know just as much about chemistry as some PhD from Harvard, because it ain't rocket science. It's difficult and challenging, but it's not rocket science. You can figure it out. So get those guys together and say, could this be a viable scenario? I suspect you would find that yes, it could. You might have to create You'd have to create several things that would come together and say, with this as the perfect storm, here's how you could get gold oxide into your skin and create these terrible sores that come about in the days coming from the mark of the beast itself, in the days of the tribulation. Excellent thinking. I like that. Thanks very much. Okay. I'm out of time, and I've got a number of questions here. I like that. From the bureaucrat. If you never question the assumptions, you'll be a sucker your whole life. How totally true. And here on this program, we got tired of being suckers, didn't we? But we've all been there. Excellent. Okay, got to end the program. But Sunday got two good things. One is our hermeneutic study, 9:45. 10:45 is our worship time, and then at about 11:15, when the sermon comes on, I'll be preaching the first sermon of the life and times of Abraham, and look forward to that, and would love for you to join that. Then next week, a week from tonight, starts our Taos Prophecy Conference, September 23rd through 25th. We're going to talk a little chemistry. We're going to talk a little let there be light. We're going to talk a little electrons. We're going to put all that together. I'm gathering my thoughts together. All through it, and reading some fascinating stuff, both old fascinating stuff and old theological fascinating stuff and new fascinating stuff, and so that's again a week from today. So hey, you can drive from anywhere in the United States and get here by next Friday night, and what a blessing we'll have, and maybe you'll even want to stay for the road trip afterwards. Need a place to stay? Let me know. We'll pull in a camper or something for you and get you taken care of. So check us out. That, for those of you who just can't do it, and I realize we'll have it online as we do our other programs as well. And God bless you. Thanks for being with us. I appreciate it. And we shall come together and see you very, very soon. And hope that you'll join us throughout the weekend. Maybe find some archives to watch, something like that. And again, ladies and gentlemen, you take care. We'll see you soon.